This comment asks, how do you deal with frustration and whining in dogs? They can't hold a sit-stay for long. How do you help them calm down better? So I think this is a great question. Thank you to the commenter for asking it. I think this really highlights why we don't approach behavior concerns with operant conditioning. Imagine that you're at the airport and your flight has just been delayed for like the third time. And so you're frustrated because you had an expectation and that expectation is not being met. And you're kind of complaining about it. And you're kind of complaining about it loudly because you're frustrated and you are displacing that arousal by complaining about it verbally. And that is annoying to the people around you. And you're kind of up and you're kind of pacing around, and the more you pace and the more, you're on your phone complaining to your friend, the more worked up you get. And so your displacement of that frustration is actually sustaining and even elevating your stress levels. And so someone comes over to you, a friend, an airport employee, they come over and they say, okay, I want you to sit in that chair and don't move. And if you do that, I'll give you a cookie. And you're like adrenalized, right? You don't want to hold still. Your whole body is telling you to move. But you do it because the person is insistent. And so now you're sitting there adrenalized. And all of the resources that you could be into, taking deep breaths, calming yourself down, doing some grounding exercises, engaging in some movement, maybe instead of pacing back and forth, like a nice lap around the airport. Instead of engaging in behaviors that could help you calm down, you're now just sitting there, adrenalized and frustrated, and you've lost the agency of how to move your body. Imagine instead if your friend came up to you and said, hey, this is really frustrating. Let's go take a lap, go by the food court, maybe get a drink of water, maybe get a snack, take some deep breaths, stretch our legs. That'll help us feel better. So we want to do the same for our dogs. If our dogs are frustrated and their stress levels are at such a level that their sympathetic nervous system is more engaged than their parasympathetic, and they're headed more towards that fight or flight than anything else, or if they're a little lower on the stress scale and they're trying to cope with the stress, but they're doing so in ways that are going to sustain or elevate their stress levels, like pacing, vocalizing, jumping, spinning, running, we want to help them take a little space and come down and engage in behaviors that will actually help them lower their stress hormones. Licking, sniffing, chewing, getting a drink of water, holding a toy in their mouth. Maybe my friend leads me through some grounding exercises, and with dogs that might look like things like the circle method or pattern games. And if I have a lot of practice of finding myself in those scenarios, learning to recognize, okay, I'm getting frustrated. I know what makes me feel better here. I'm going to step away from the situation and I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to get a glass of water. I'm going to do a little like bilateral stimulation, tapping on my shoulders. That's really reinforcing because it's going to make me feel better internally. And so the more I'm able to engage in those behaviors of taking space and engaging in something that actually helps lower my stress levels, the more I'm going to be able to do that on my own, the less and less I'm going to need my friend to say, hey, you're getting frustrated. Let's take a walk together and go get a drink. And so the comparison is the human is going to need to do less and less management because the dog is going to be able to self-regulate more and more on their own. And there can be a lot of steps up to that point. Certainly by the time we're talking about the frustration is already occurring, we are redirecting. In behavior modification, we want to create a setup where we're avoiding hitting frustration in the first place, and working to build those skills a bit lower on the stress scale and with positive emotions, and then increasing the challenge of that as the dog is successful. So there's a lot of nuance there in how we might create that. But this is a really good example of why responding to a behavior concern, responding to big emotions, high arousal with operant conditioning is often going to be either inefficient or ineffective. Because when we ask our dog to perform behaviors in the face of stress, we're obscuring our data, their body language and behavior. We are reducing their agency in a way that we simply don't need to, which decreases resilience to stress, increases stress, period. And we're asking them to spend a lot of energy on something that doesn't really matter. if I'm putting a lot of energy into just sitting still and being quiet and controlling my emotions in that way, I don't have a lot of space to access my skills of like taking a break, moving away, and doing some deep breathing or getting a drink of water.